Thank you all for coming. I begin with a great debt of gratitude to a lot of people, some still with us, and others already crossed over to the other side. Today is a great day for me. It's the culmination of a journey that started almost a decade ago. We're here for the presentation of the thesis entitled An Assessment of Relationships of Teachers' Sense of Efficacy and Project-Based Learning. It's a defense in partial fulfillment of the requirements for the degree of Doctor of Education in Educational Leadership with a specialization in Educational Technology. Thank you for your time, and thank you for being here. Thank you for giving me this wonderful opportunity. And now let me present the panel. I want you to please acknowledge your presence since you'll be off camera for the recording. I start with my committee chair, Dr. Dale Williams. You kind of muted. You're not going to be recorded. If you could just acknowledge.
Good afternoon.
All right. Thank you, sir, for your time. Our research methodologist, Dr. Jason Stroman. Dr. Stroman, you muted as well. Just wanted to get your voice on the recording, and after you get muted again. All right. So Dr. Stroman is muted.
Yep, I'm here.
All right, great. Thank you, sir, for your time. And last but not least, our panel validator, Dr. Stephen Notaro.
Pleasure to be here.
All right. Thank you, sir, for your time. Appreciate it. This presentation will last 25 minutes or so, and we'll take questions, if any. I also wanted to acknowledge the critical contributions of Drs. Frederick Lawrence, Dr. Patricia Durso, as well as my academic advisors, Robert Gentile, I hope I pronounced his name correctly, or Gentile, and Matt Santiago. So what are we covering in this presentation? In the next 25 to 30 minutes, after a brief personal introduction, we'll introduce the problem and purpose statements, discuss the study's theoretical framework, research methods and design, list the 3 research questions, explain the population and sample selections, justify the pilot study and data collection, present the results, suggest the significance of those results, offer recommendations, and finally take any questions from the panel. Now, let me tell you a little bit about myself. It won't be too long. I cannot speak of myself without first telling you a little bit about the woman responsible for it all. The picture you see up there. Her name is Vierge Nuguez. She has the Virgin Mary's name in French, by the way. Back in Haiti, she always wanted her children to go as far as she never had a chance to go, in formal education, that is. I have promised her to reach the very top one day, but unfortunately, I lost her before completing this doctoral journey. Now you understand why today is so special for me. I'm doing it for me, of course, but I started the journey because I gave my word to my dear mother love. We were very close friends. All right, back to me before I get too emotional. This is also why I am a lifelong learner and why education is so important to me. I love to teach and share what I know with others, as little as it might be. I've been doing so through YouTube. You probably can catch my channel, my websites, and in many organizations. I've changed career from business development for technology solutions to teaching as a consultant and a university professor, mostly in West Africa. I teach several business-related topics, but my expertise and love remain business English as a second language and project management, which explains my interest in project-based learning. Okay, so how did we go about assessing relationships of teachers' sense of efficacy and project-based learning? Well, I really love this definition of research by Dr. Cecile Badenhorst. She defines research as an argument conceptualized around a problem, and then researchers make claims which become more or less truth-like based on their evidence. Therefore, the problem statement is the very heart of the research. For this study, which claims did we make? And what evidence did we find? So the problem for this study was that there is no known assessment of relationships for the interaction between the use of project-based learning and ELL teachers on teachers' sense of efficacy, resulting in a failure to consistently attract more teachers to the use of project-based learning as an effective way to better meet the learning needs of students. Okay, from the problem came, of course, the purpose statement. And the purpose of this quasi-experimental study was to assess the interactional relationships between the use of project-based learning and ELL teachers on the combined subscales of teachers' sense of efficacy in Miami-Dade County public schools. But what showed that there was an urgent need for this research? Let me share a couple of points with you. Research shows that teachers have one of the most significant impacts on student achievement. And those teachers, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little dry throat. And the teachers with higher sense of efficacy are more likely to meet the needs of their students. U.S. public schools also are not adequately meeting the needs of their ELL students, as evidenced by the enduring achievement gap with their non-ELL peers. And they are also the fastest growing student group in America. Lastly, when it comes to educational attainment, America continues to fall behind member countries of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD countries. When I started this research, we were 12th, and today we are 16th. Now, it's not so that our educational level is going down, it's the other countries are going faster than us. So, and now, let's take a quick look at our 3 variables of interest. We first take a look at the 3 dependent variables: the teacher sense of efficacy, divided into 3 subscales: student engagement, instructional strategies, and class management. Self-efficacy was developed by Professor Albert Bandura, on whose shoulders much of this research rests. He left us July of last year. May he rest in peace. Self-efficacy refers to an individual's belief in their own ability to perform the behaviors or tasks necessary to achieve specific performances. The teacher efficacy scale, which helps us measure a teacher's sense of efficacy, was developed by Professor Shannon Moran et al. I hope I pronounced her name correctly, inspired also by Professor Bandura's research. Now, ELL teachers. The first independent variable, ELL teacher, means any teacher with at least one student in the classroom. It's a strange definition, but it's a definition that was pushed by the League of United Latin American Citizens, LULAC, and also accepted by the Department of Education. Why? Because if there's one student whose needs are not being met, that student will be isolated. So anyone who has one student is considered an ELL teacher. So the second independent variable is a little more interesting, at least for me. PBL, project-based learning. Project-based learning came mostly from PMI, Project Management Institute. They change their standards every 5 years. The latest change took effect in January of last year. They shifted from process-based approach to a principle-based approach. So from 10 knowledge areas, it becomes 12 principles. From 5 process groups, which has 49 processes, it becomes 10 performance domains. But PBL was lined up mostly with the process-based approach. So project management is defined according to PMI as any temporary endeavor with a definite beginning and end, in sharp contrast with operations management. The new principle-based approach is, that distinction is blurred. Okay, but of course, it's beyond the scope of our study. So now here's the biggest issue. PBL has no official definition yet. Some institutions are trying to establish standards, but there's no consensus yet. The more visible ones are the Buck Institute for Education, BIE, the Partnership for 21st Century Learning, P21, Project Management Institute Educational Foundation, of which I'm a member, PMIEF. A popular definition of PBL, mostly supported by BIE, says that project-based learning is a technology-driven teaching method in which students learn by actively engaging in real-world and personally meaningful projects. And the latest standard from BIE is the PBL Gold Standard. If you look at the picture, it promotes standards, content, knowledge, and skills for traditional learning in math, English, and history, etc. Authenticity, okay, you have to have authenticity to claim that you're doing project-based learning, which deals with real-world challenge, need, concern, or problem. Inquiry, putting focus on research methodology as early as possible. Student voice and choice, students having input in their own content and delivery. Collaboration, students doing assignments as a team. Employability skills, okay, using Google, typing, conducting meetings, keeping deadlines, etc. These are skills they can use at work. Community partners. The projects involve parents, officials, the public at large. Feedback and revision from peers and teachers. Publicly presented products happening once the project is completed. And finally, reflection, promoting higher learning. According to Bloom's taxonomy, from simply trying to remember and understand to now having students spending more time to apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. Believe me, project-based learning has it all. And now, let's take a look at the theoretical framework. The theoretical framework for this research came mostly from the research of Professor Bandura as well. The following theories added considerable meaning, context, and purpose to this research. Constructivism claims that knowledge acquisition is not passive, but active. Some of the proponents were John Dewey, Piaget, Lev Vygotsky, etc. Project-based learning is rooted in a constructivist approach. Social learning theory asserts that learning can occur through mutual observations. It helps us understand how teachers' behavior can affect their student outcome. Social cognitive theory added self-belief as a factor in the learning that occurs in the previous social learning theory, which explains how teachers' beliefs affect their performance. The concept of behavior or theory of modeling stipulates that learning can only take place when the following four elements are present: attention, retention, reproduction, and motivation. So if a learner doesn't pay attention, no learning. If the learner pays attention, cannot retain, no learning. And if they pay attention, retain, and they cannot reproduce what they've learned, no learning. And without motivation to do it all, you still don't have learning. So they need all those four elements. Another concept, reciprocal determinism, purports that behavior is a function of iterative and reciprocal interactions between individual behavior, cognitive factors, and environmental circumstances, which explains how teachers' behavior sets the stage for a student's success or failure. And the last concept, reciprocal triadic causation, stipulates that a person's beliefs affect their environment and their behavior or outcome, and the environment also affects a person's behavior and beliefs. We don't need to get into those details. You know, somebody who lives in the ghetto, they're going to be affected by that environment. Somebody who lives in a suburb will be affected as well. Which explains the connection between teachers' performance and that of their students. Finally, self-efficacy, defined as a person's belief in their ability to succeed in a specific task. which explains how teachers' performance is affected by their own beliefs. Now, what was the method and design employed in the research? The research method was quantitative, was suited for our need to quantitatively assess relationships. The research design was quasi-experimental design due to our inability to use random group assignments. So both the method and design were adequate to answer the three research questions, which were as follows. Research question 1, what's the relationship between teachers of ELLs or ELL teachers and teachers' sense of efficacy? Research question 2, what's the relationship between project-based learning use and teachers' sense of efficacy? Research question 3, what's the relationship for the interaction between project-based learning use and ELL teachers on teachers' sense of efficacy? We were only able to reject the hypothesis for question 2, for the relationship of between project-based learning use and teachers' sense of efficacy in the instructional strategies. So we'll get into that a little later. Now, how about the population and sample the research managed to cover? In general, population is intended to be loosely all public school teachers in the US. I say loosely because you have different types of public schools. They're not all the same. Some have more Hispanic, some have more Asians, and different type of students. But the study took place in Miami-Dade County Public Schools, which is the specifically targeted population of the study. Sample frame was 15,785 teachers. It took me more than 2 years to collect data, so I'll spare you the details in the interest of time. But we ended up with 233 responses, of which 223 were used after we removed univariate and multivariate outliers. And you know how a MANOVA analysis is extremely sensitive to outliers. Okay, why did we conduct a pilot study? Frankly, we did not need one. Pilot studies are required when new instruments are introduced, but it was used in the research to uncover population parameters, particularly project-based learning use. The effort was unsuccessful, but rich in lessons for the main study. We found out high response rate that we were told in the literature was erroneous. It was for internal surveys from the Department of Education. Ours turned out to be between 2 to 3% instead of the 75-80% that we saw. We realized personal Gmail was limited to 50 emails per day, and that can be a problem when you need to send 4,000 to 5,000 emails. So, and then we realized some of the questions we had to make them required to minimize missing data points. We found all that in a pilot study. And also I added Survey Collector to SurveyMonkey, and it was the election some of the time, and SurveyMonkey was automatically blocked. People had survey fatigue. So we used GMass, which was quite insidious because it is like in addition to your personal email. So that was great. So we started hitting some inboxes instead of the junk mails. That was great. So we learned all that from the pilot study. We were grateful. So I'm glad we conducted a pilot study. And now on to the data collection process. The teachers answered 14 questions, 12 from the teacher sense of efficacy scale to measure teacher sense of efficacy, and 2 grouping questions on PBL use or non-use, and the presence or not of ELS students in classrooms. The teacher sense of efficacy scale instrument is considered valid and has been substantially used in research. Now, during my literature search, I could not find any specific information on the number of teachers using project-based learning to teach in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. So to my pleasant surprise, the survey indicated that 31% of Miami-Dade County Public School teachers use project-based learning to teach. I was kind of surprised. I expected a lower number than that. The collected answers were analyzed using a MANOVA analysis. So MANOVA analysis requires satisfaction of the following 9 assumptions. Sorry for that. That slide is kind of crowded, but I wanted to include all 9 of them and respect the number of slides. So bear with me. Assumption 1, presence of 2 or more dependent variables at the interval or ratio level. We met that assumption because teachers' sense of efficacy had 3 subscales, and they were turned into ratio, levels. So, number 2, presence of 2 or more independent variables consists of 2 or more categorical independent groups. That's the other assumption. So we had that as well. We had 2 categorical variables: project-based learning use and teachers of ELLs, yes or no variables. 3, independence of observations. Respondents belong to a single group, so we made that assumption as well. Sufficient sample size. We were a little worried at first when we were facing difficulty collecting data. We used online tools. They say that for 15,000, you need at least 735. But when you take the analysis into consideration, using G-Power version 3.1, we realized we only needed about 56 people to generate information. And since we had 223, so we were good there as well. 5, absence of univariate outliers. We verified that using a box plot. This one is just a guess one. You generate the box plot, and then we realized that we were more or less able to draw a straight line through the data points, so that's why we met that. And also, MANOVA is quite robust to this violation. Although we did not violate it, we met it more or less, so we're good there as well. 6, multivariate normality. So we use SPSS to generate Mahalanobis distance. And in that, they say that if you have 3 dependent variables, like we did, the highest number got to be less than 16.27. Our highest number was 13.68. 7, linear relationship between all pairs of dependent variables. So we use a scatter plot matrix to verify that. So they have to be slightly linear. 8, homogeneity of variances and variance covariance matrices. To verify homogeneity of variances, we use Levine's test of equality of error variances, and all the p-values were greater than 0.05. And for variance covariance, we use box M test of equality of covariance matrices, and the p-value we found was 0.336, which is greater than 0.05. So we made that assumption as well. And the homogeneity means that all groups have similar variances. And the variance covariance is the multivariate versions of the other one. 9, and the last one, not least also, non-existence of multi-collinearity. So for this one, we use Pearson's coefficient test, and the correlations should not be greater than 0.08 or 0.09, then you'd have multi-collinearity. And all p-values we found were like 0.0. Since we cannot report that, we say p was less than 0.001. So we were great there as well. So what was the outcome from the MANOVA analysis? So we ran the MANOVA once all assumptions have been met, and the results were split into 2 main sections: interaction and main effects. The interaction effect, we use a table, multivariate test table, and we look at project-based learning use and a teacher of ELL's interaction. Measured, since we met all the assumptions, we were able to use Wilks lambda. The p-value was 0.597, greater than 0.05, so non-significant. What does that really mean? It means that all teachers using project-based learning had no greater belief in their ability to meet the needs of their students than non-ELL teachers using project-based learning. So there was no effect there. Then we turn to the main effects. So the only main effects we could notice was using the test of between subjects effects table. And all these tables are in the dissertation, the thesis as well, because we couldn't put them. We had almost 50 slides when we tried to put them, so we had to remove them. But you can use thesis to verify them. And the p-value for project-based learning use on teacher sense of efficacy was 0.006 in instructional strategy. What does that mean? It was less than a p.05, therefore very significant. What does that really mean? It means that project-based learning users had greater confidence in their ability to execute instructional strategies to meet the needs of their students. A little caveat, however, the partial eta squared value, which quantifies the strength of the relationship, was 0.034 or 3.4%, classified as a small effect. What does that mean? It means that only 3.4% of the variance in instructional strategies was explained by project-based learning use. So the research questions. For the first one, assessing relationships of teachers of ELLs on teachers' sense of efficacy, we were unable to reject it. So no effect. The second question, assessing relationships of project-based learning use on TSE, we were able to reject it in instructional strategies. So there was significant effect. And third question, interactions between project-based learning use and teachers of ELS on teacher sense of efficacy, we were unable to reject that as well. So the findings in instructional strategy was consistent with current research, but the finding on student engagement and class management were not. What are the limitations surrounding these results? Self-reported data is generally a concern, but teachers' self-reported data are usually quite reliable according to the literature. We have some references in the thesis for that. A random sampling, the other limitations, random sampling versus stratified sampling, we would have preferred to use a stratified sampling because usually they're more representative of the population. And we do know that teachers are not evenly distributed when it comes to elementary, middle, and high school. So our external validity took a small hit there, a very small one. But when it comes to Miami-Dade County Public Schools, it's not an issue. If we want to extend our findings to other districts, that's going to be a little issue right there. So in spite of the limitations, what was the real significance of the results? Well, the first one was the literature gap. There's no quantitative assessments of relationships of the three variables, so we began to fill that gap. The second one, I would say that the results support the claim that teachers who use project-based learning tend to be more confident in their ability to meet the instructional needs of their students. The third and last is the fact that our results support Bandura's theories of social learning theory and social cognitive theories. What are the recommendations based on these results? Recommendation one, the first one. We would like to see further causal investigations of project-based learning as an instructional method in U.S. public school. Further, we would love to see causal investigations of project-based learning's effect on ELL students' achievements. And then a third, we would like to see school leaders and policymakers try to consistently attract more students to more teachers and students, of course, to the use of project-based learning as an effective way to better meet the learning needs of their students. In conclusion, during this is my first time doing this first doctoral odyssey, after a long and fruitful process of vacillating between knowledge, belief, and practice, results emerged from this illuminating experiment that were both convergent and divergent with the traditional literature. Nevertheless, whatever its significance, implications, or results, scientific inquiry is a humbling privilege that magnifies the inescapability of our interdependence as Homo sapiens in the search for the naked truth. That concludes our presentation, and now I would like to take questions, if any. Let me magnify that a little bit. These are some of the references, and I am ready for questions, if any. Thank you for your time and your patience.
Yes, thank you very much for a very well-designed study and presentation of both your research, your analyses, and your findings. So I'm going to yield to both Dr. Stroman and Dr. Naratto. So either one of you can start with questions and comments.
Dr. Stroman.
By the way, good presentation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
So that's all the questions, comments I have. I think at this point, what we will do as a committee, we will deliberate. We will ask you if you just step out of the room.
Last 3 minutes, 5 minutes.
Stay close, because I'm going to need you to come back. So if you come back in about 5 minutes, we will have some comments for you. And next,
I think we stopped the recording.
Yeah, and then you want to turn the recording off.
Yes. You want me to stop? Oh, okay.
Stop the recording. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Stop the recording.